You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Look at the stars. The great kings of the past look down on us from those stars. So whenever you feel alone, just remember that those kings will always be there to guide you.
I don't think it is very useful to speculate on what God might or might not be able to do. Rather, we should examine what he actually does with the universe we live in.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon. The most profound discoveries are not necessarily beyond that next star. They're within us, woven into the threads that bind us.
Hello, beautiful people. Happy Wednesday. Happy Mercury Day. We made it. We survived the eclipse. We made it through election day. So if you're here with me live, let me know. How are you feeling? How is the energy feeling? I wish I could tell you that, okay, the eclipse is over. Everything is smooth sailing now. But the transits we're talking about today bring quite a bit of tension. So if you're still feeling the tension, you're not going crazy. There's just a lot going on in our solar system at the moment. Yeah. Alyssa with the Gold Country, which says, need all the insight today. Well, today we're talking about a T-square, one of the most volatile and tense aspects we experience when we look at astrology charts. And it's not just today we're experiencing this. We talked a lot about it in the eclipse forecast, but the planets that are involved in the T-square are all making connections with each other over the next couple of days. So we're going to specifically talk about two different transits that are exact today, but we're also going to zoom out and look at the broader picture here with this T-square still influencing us and maybe bringing some ongoing tension into our lives. Rose is here. Rachel is here. Nick did not win the Powerball. Me neither, Nick, but everything else is okay. Yeah. It would make it a lot easier if one of us won the Powerball, right? Woke up with my energy dragging, Rose says, but I feel a little restless now that I've had breakfast trying to figure out finances once I have to start paying student loans again. That is the energy, like trying to figure things out, moving pieces around. There's a lot of responsibility coming up, I think, with Saturn involved in this T-square. Rachel says, feeling drained. I've been overworking myself, just ready for a break. Another conversation happened with my mom yesterday that brought more insights to help me let go. All part of the transformation, Rachel, and all part of what the universe is bringing us through these tense transits. So let's start with a check on the current energy. The sun is in Scorpio. The moon is now in Gemini. The moon moved into Gemini this morning, but not before. I'm going to kind of go backwards today, actually, because the moon did make one connection early this morning, and that was a sextile to Jupiter at 29 degrees. Okay, so actually, I'm going to show you this on the chart. And you can see if I jump back, this was at about 4 a.m. So here it is, 29 degrees of the Taurus moon, Jupiter at 29 degrees in Pisces. They're making that nice sextile to each other. So anytime we have a supportive angle to Jupiter, we're feeling optimism. But because these planets connected at 29 degrees, 4 a.m. Pacific time, 7 a.m. Eastern time, you might have woken up feeling that antsiness, that restlessness. The 29th degree, the anaretic degree, is just known for making us a little bit jumpy or restless. And that's something you might have felt to start the day today. But then very shortly after, at about 5:30 this morning Pacific time, the moon moved into Gemini. So that is what we're currently feeling. And just a note on the sun in Scorpio and the moon in Gemini, over the next couple of days, the moon won't be making any connections to all of those Scorpio planets. They'll be making, the moon will be making inconjunct angles. So It's kind of this awkward energy between the Gemini moon and the Scorpio sun, but not quite as activating, which is nice. So the rest of this episode, we're just going to dive into this T-square. So let's start by taking a look at what planets are squaring each other. On the chart, you can see we have the Sun and Mercury still within a degree of each other. So not quite that Mercury cazimi element that we talked about that happened the morning of the eclipse, but they're still in a conjunction, which means our mental state and our experience are kind of one and the same with the Sun conjunct Mercury. We're doing a lot of thinking and processing, especially now that the moon is in Gemini, ruled by Mercury. There is an energy of just processing everything that came up during the eclipse. Our words are our friends with the moon in Gemini. So having a journal handy, having that trusted friend on speed dial to process your emotions can be really helpful, not just because the moon is in Gemini, but also because the Sun is conjunct Mercury. And today, the Sun is going to oppose Uranus. So a T-square is marked by this red right triangle here. We have an opposition and one planet squaring the planets on either side of the opposition. Saturn is the focal point of this T-square, and we'll get to Saturn in just a moment. But I want to first start by talking about the Sun opposing Uranus. So the Sun at 17 degrees, Uranus at 16 degrees. This was an exact transit overnight last night, I think right after midnight, for accuracy's sake. Yeah, 12:30 in the morning, the Sun opposed Uranus. And it's really interesting when we look at collectively what is happening right now. We have a major election going on still in the United States. Ballots are being counted. And I noticed in a lot of the election coverage that we were watching in our household, because yes, you know, we both used to work in news. Election night is like a holiday for people who worked in news. They kept calling it the balance of power, that what's going to happen with the balance of power in the United States, because there are a lot of congressional seats up in the air and the House of Representatives could potentially swing Republican. So it's really interesting that the Sun opposing Uranus, the planet of disruption, the planet of change, the planet of upsets, put the emphasis on our awareness of all the changes that have been happening or that are happening. I would not be surprised. I haven't checked in this morning to see where all those races are at in the swing states, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is a change in the balance of power. Now, that might make some people really excited. That might make some people nervous. That's the energy of Uranus, right? Changes, disruptions, and it can bring a little bit of anxiety, but also excitement. And Uranus is that planet that reminds us that anxiety and excitement often feel the same in our bodies. So if you're feeling just that anxiousness or that restlessness, Uranus is opposing the Sun, and we're more prone to doing things differently or acting differently. If we're feeling the anxiety, there could be this want or need to kind of act out or rebel, with Uranus being the planet of rebellion. So just know that if you're feeling a little bit anxious, most people probably are today, and instead of being the disruption that makes other people feel more anxious, or, you know, poking the bear is not really going to help anybody. The beautiful thing, there's always a darkness and a light to every transit. So how can we use the Sun opposing Uranus to our benefit today? Well, breakthroughs are possible. Innovation is possible as we're attracted to doing things differently. We probably won't be able to fully understand the outcome of what we're doing just yet, or the changes that are happening just yet, but just staying open, staying flexible in general when we talk about this T-square is key, because we have the T-square playing out in fixed signs. All of the planets forming these tense angles to each other are in fixed signs. So there is this tendency to be stubborn and rigid and kind of stay in the energy we're in. But the antidote here is being flexible, being open to chance encounters, being open to new ideas, being open to changes of plan, being open to possibility. You might have even noticed that the Sun opposing Uranus created a change of plans of some sort today, or kind of disrupted what you had in mind for the day. That's okay. That's okay. I mean, I know I had to keep pushing back the live stream today because something popped up. So that might be what's going on with you too. And just staying flexible, staying open to the changes unfolding is key. Lots of different things coming up. Yes, I think I said that word for word just a few minutes ago. Like, things just keep popping up, and that's Uranus. Like, surprise, here's something else to deal with. Surprise, here's another disruption. Here's another upset. That's kind of the energy we're feeling right now on, I think, more of a personal level, but on a collective level, big changes are playing out. Yeah, lots of tension on Facebook today. I've been ignoring it. I don't blame you. Facebook is not my friend during anytime there's something controversial in the country going on, I'm like, we're just going to close Facebook for a while. Twitter too. We don't need that. We don't need that in our lives. I like to stay on Instagram, YouTube. Instagram is perfectly curated to be my happy place. So yeah, or the mute button might be your friend today too. Muting people who are spouting off about their political opinions, whether you agree with them or not. That's just not the vibe. Personally, not a fan of spewing hateful things on the internet, or even you might notice people expressing their agitation about the changes happening, because remember, the sun is also conjunct Mercury right now. So Mercury is making this opposition to Uranus too, and our awareness and our communication are one and the same. So when we're aware of the change, when we're aware of the disruption, we're going to want to speak about it. The sun is conjunct Mercury. We want to talk about it. We want to communicate it. And that could be where people are a little fiery on social media, or just a little bit harsh. The sun and Mercury are in Scorpio. Talk about a harsh energy. People are like, this is the truth of the matter, and that could feel very disruptive with both of these planets opposing Uranus. Oh, feeling super tender today and a little bit alone. Well, you are not alone, and we are so happy to have you here, Court. Yeah, we're always here for you. Love you all. Hi, Corby. That whole go with the flow thing, a lot is beyond our control. Nick's always here to remind us to go with the flow, and that can be helpful on a day when it's really easy to get stuck in, like, this is how it is, with all this fixed energy. I feel like I'm a pro juggler now, but I can't take on more. You pulled the words from my mouth. Seriously. Boundaries, energetic boundaries. I had a friend reach out to me last night to try to make some last minute plans, and part of me really wanted to be there and jump into it, but I just knew energy wise, I was like, I cannot sign on to one more thing, even if it's a fun thing. I can't, and that's where boundaries can come in. It's not even necessarily that we have to set boundaries with people being disruptive, although that could be very helpful today too. But just setting boundaries with your own energy and how much you're signing on to right now. Limited my time on social media yesterday. It's a zoo. And remember, just speaking as a former newscaster, a lot of the information that comes in the first couple hours, or even the night of the election, it's always changing. They're always counting more ballots. So I think today things will start to be a little bit more solidified and we'll have a better picture. But if you're feeling anxious, just know that information will be there for you and the final results will be in, and you're not missing a whole lot in the meantime other than speculation. And, we had the people on CNN talking about, well, if this state votes this and blah, 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 and doing what they do best. That can be fun. That can be fun if you're into politics, but if it's feeling emotionally triggering for you, and that goes for anything, not just election day, notice how the information you're consuming is making you feel. This plays into the opposition between the sun, Mercury, and Uranus too, because Uranus can be disruptive, and the information we're consuming is affecting our personality, our awareness, our expression today with Mercury conjunct the sun. So limiting social media, not a bad idea. So that's kind of the first part of this T-square, right? You can see that dark red line in the middle of the chart, the sun and Mercury opposing Uranus. The nice thing here is that Venus has moved far enough away that we're not quite feeling that opposition as heavily. It's still there, but relationship upsets are not quite as likely anymore. It's definitely still possible, right? Our relationships are mirrors of our whole experience, but I really see this being more like conversations being disruptive, the information we're taking in being disruptive, us being disruptive with how we're communicating. So the how here is really important. How are we consuming? What are we consuming? And how are we sharing with other people too? How are we expressing ourselves today? Now, though, we have to talk about Saturn. I'm so happy you're here, Bree. Thank you for seeing me and seeing the effort. I'm trying to show up, trying to be here for you all, but like Rachel said, also juggling 4 other things constantly at the same time. This is my happy place, though. So I'm glad I could find some time to be here with you all today. On that note, though, let's talk about Saturn. Mercury is squaring Saturn. So the reason today is all about the T-square is because all of the planets involved in the T-square are making some sort of connection to each other. We talked so much about that Saturn-Uranus square a couple weeks back, and we're not quite feeling that as strongly as we did moving through October, but Saturn and Uranus are still within 2 degrees of that square. So it's a loose square, but we're still feeling that clash between old versus new, innovation versus tradition, and just that tension between playing it safe and innovating. So there is that going on in the background that we've been feeling for some time. But today, exactly at 11:51 p.m., so late tonight, Mercury is going to square Saturn. And this is something we feel multiple times a year, Mercury squaring Saturn. I think the last time was actually back in April. So it's been a while. But coming back to Mercury being the planet that rules our mindset, our ability to communicate, our focus, our mental state, that planet squaring Saturn can bring up negative thoughts or doubts, fears can easily come up today with Mercury squaring Saturn. I know it's not the most fun stuff to talk about. And even this morning, I woke up feeling like just a little negative, as much as I want to be like, yay, happy, it's another day of life, all the opportunity, all the possibility. I just kind of was like, I'm feeling a little down today. So I know I'm more sensitive to Mercury transits personally, being a Virgo rising. If you're a Gemini rising, you might feel that as well. But all of us are prone to doubts, negative thoughts coming up. And this is playing into the lessons we've been learning. We talked about this during the eclipse, but Saturn squaring the eclipse was bringing up lessons. And with Mercury specifically squaring Saturn today, it's helping us. Again, it's this energy of processing. Processing seems like the big theme today. Processing the fears that came up, processing the lessons that the universe has been placing on your path. Now, this can cause a difficulty communicating with other people because Saturn is that reserved energy or that doubtful energy. And it might be like, should I share this thing? Or am I saying too much? And with Saturn in Aquarius and Mercury in Scorpio, coming back to the how we're saying things, it could be really all too easy to speak and for it to come across as very harsh, or to be like, I need to be the one teaching the lesson. Remember, we're not here to teach anybody else harsh truths. And if there is a truth that you need to get across that feels like it might be a little bit difficult to convey or for the other person to take in, I'm not opposed to sugarcoating things today. I'm not opposed to some nice, intentional, gentle communication. Mercury in Scorpio makes us want to be like, you want the truth? You can't handle the truth. That's Mercury in Scorpio. Like, I'm going to tell it to you anyway. We're going to get to the bottom of this thing. But if there is a difficult conversation that needs to be had today, make sure love is at the center of it and that you're being intentional with how your words are coming across. Even if you think you're being gentle, like be a little bit more gentle than you think you need to be, because we're all more sensitive. We're all more prone to disruption with Uranus opposing Mercury right now. Just try not to be too harsh. Now, there could be positive potential with this square to Saturn too. You know, I always like to bring the silver lining in. Mercury and Scorpio can make us prone to obsessive thoughts. So like once we get on something, we just need to get to the bottom of it. We want to research it endlessly. We need to get to the truth of the matter. But Saturn brings this element of not maturity. Maturity is not the right word, but like steadfastness. So you could find yourself like really deep in a research hole or obsessively trying to get to the bottom of something on a day like today. We can use this to our advantage though. If you have a lot of work that you need to do, mental focus is favored. So if there's something, especially something dry or boring, like I know tax season is over, but you know, I think what Rose was just saying, having to work on your accounting or your finances, this seems like a good time to do it, to just like really get to the bottom of things, get into the weeds of things, do the things you have to do, you know, think about the things you have to think about, not necessarily fun stuff, but we can tap into this extreme mental focus. And this can really help us complete difficult mental tasks. We have the tenacity and the willpower when Mercury squares Saturn to like do things and do them for the sake of responsibility and maturity. So that's a great way to use this transit. Just notice if you're feeling a little bit irritable because you don't want to be doing the thing, make sure you don't take that irritability out on someone else, because it's a T-square. We're all a little bit more irritable and restless. And I will say too, Mercury squaring Saturn, the last thing I want to touch on with this, as I mentioned, being really gentle with our words, but you might even think you're being gentle or you have the best intentions, and how you say something comes across in a way it wasn't intended to come across. So be ready to say you're sorry, be ready to clarify, and not like, no, you're wrong. Just like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say it like that, or that's not what I meant, that's not what I intended, or I understand how it might have come across as a little harsh. I'm kind of irritable today. Sorry about that. Here's what I really meant. I know sometimes it's hard to put our ego aside, or it's easy to get caught up in the like, no, that's not what I meant, you know. I that was probably very convincing because I am that person, but just be especially mindful of that today. Yeah, ooh, right on your sun in the 12th, Saturn. I'm assuming, yeah. I literally wrote this morning about how I'm feeling so misunderstood, not heard. I am so over these squares on my planets. And that eclipse really playing into, like, the whole eclipse was squaring your sun then. So this is a huge turning point for you and how you're showing up. And that is uncomfortable. And I know you've been stressed. I know you've been dealing with a lot of tasks that you have to do. Speaking of Mercury squaring Saturn, yeah, literally trying to get this training done. That is exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah. And Mercury squaring your sun too. Everything is squaring your sun. Everything is tense for you right now. Yeah. And I will say Jupiter in Pisces is harmonizing with your moon right now, right? With your moon in Scorpio. So just big emotions too, right? It's just like amplifying your emotions at the anaretic degree. Yeah. I am feeling for you. And sending you lots of love and grace, because we've all been there. Whether we realize that transits are playing into it or not, we've all been at this point that's like, all right, one more thing. What else? What's next? It won't last forever, though. That's why I'm staying in my bubble, avoiding confrontation today. Hey, if that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do. If you know that you are in a spicy mood, if you know that you're not going to be able to communicate effectively with other people, something my dad taught me is he calls it the window of communication. I think he learned this from his therapist or something, but he was like, sometimes I realize when I am out of the window of communication, or I'm in a conflict with someone else and we are no longer in the window of communication where we can communicate effectively with each other because our emotions are heightened and we can't think clearly. And that's something I think of now. I'm like, I think we're out of the window of communication. I think we need to take a breather on this and come back to the subject when we can both think more clearly and communicate more kindly. Now, when we're in that setting, it takes a lot of practice to get to the point where you can be like, we're not in the window of communication anymore. Let's table this. At least if you're me, maybe it's my Scorpio moon and all of us in Scorpio season. Scorpio energy is like, no, we just got to keep going deeper. We got to keep digging in. So notice during Scorpio season in general, if you are falling into those patterns of like, just got to keep getting in there, got to keep digging the hole deeper. That's not being in the window of communication. So that might be helpful if you find yourself in a tricky little spat today as Mercury squares Saturn. And this also could feel like, I think I mentioned this before, but like, I have to teach you a lesson, Mercury squaring Saturn. What makes you the authority to teach everybody else a lesson? We're all trying to figure it out here, right? So unless you're a parent, and then it's like literally your job to teach your kids lessons, but are they really going to be receptive if you are that like authoritative, like, I'm going to teach you a lesson? Probably not. So gentle communication, noticing if the window of communication is closing might be helpful. Yeah, had a challenging week after this eclipse. Looking forward to workout classes, burning off that energy tonight. And with the moon in Gemini now, there is this just general feeling of Gemini energy is very flighty and restless, right? So, you know, the moon's not making any connections today, which we will take with this T-square playing out. But just in general, we might feel like we need to talk things out because the moon's in Gemini and we need to process our emotions through our words. But sometimes I know I am prone to this. I like really need somebody to be my sounding board, and I'm not feeling better, even though I'm like word vomiting all over them. Mostly Julian, mostly my partner getting the brunt of this, but my best friends have been there too, right? And I'm just getting myself more worked up and not feeling resolved. That could be the case today. You know, we're not going to get to the bottom of everything today. We're not going to figure it all out. I hate to break it to you, but there's always going to be some element of unknown in this life. And that could bring some peace too, just knowing we can't figure it all out today. And that's all right. My Scorpio moon is very obsessive right now. All those planets on top of my Pluto and my moon right now. I'm just processing so much. My brain is on overload. The moon in Gemini could amplify that too, just like that mental overload. Gemini energy wants to be thinking about 5 things at once and being constantly stimulated. So notice if you're craving stimulation too, how are you trying to achieve that stimulation? Is it through, like I just mentioned, the word vomiting and like trying to constantly get some sort of nurturing through conversation, even though everybody involved knows there's no solution to the problem you're talking about? Or like what Nikki said, moving your body could be very helpful today, or keeping a journal close by and rage on the page, or just like journal out your thoughts. That can be really helpful to just move that energy through you. I need that space right now. I can't deal with people. Your journal's right there for you. Yeah. Ooh, and your Mars return. So we kind of talked through the transits, but I just want to wrap all of this up with an overview of this T-square again, and really kind of tie it in a nice big bow, if you will, although I don't know how nice it will be. But when we have a T-square, it's almost like a formula, okay? We have all of these Scorpio planets, really the Sun, Mercury, and Venus opposing Uranus, and the nodes are, you know, playing a factor as well, but we'll just stick to the basic planets. So we have disruptions. An opposition to Uranus brings disruptions, it brings upsets, it brings changes, it brings discomfort that forces us to innovate. It forces us to do things differently. With Saturn squaring all of these planets, Saturn becomes the focal point of the T-square. And Saturn is actually the planet that we can look to here for guidance. So we talked about all the different ways that this T-square is probably affecting us the most today. But if you are feeling lost, again, aren't we all right now? If you're feeling a little lost, if you're feeling overwhelmed, Saturn is actually the planet to look to. And that might seem counterintuitive because Saturn can be, you know, the ache in our side, just the thorn in our foot. You know, Saturn is not, it's the least fun planet to talk about if you ask me. But Saturn is here to be that authority, to teach us lessons. Saturn is the planet of karma and of time. Saturn likes to slow things down so we can really let everything sink in and be rooted, be grounded. So look for the lesson. Look for the lesson. If you're feeling restless, what's the lesson here? Almost find that internal authority, that internal parent, that internal Saturn. Like, if I'm parenting myself right now, what would I do? Would I put myself in a little bit of a timeout? Like Rachel's saying, like, I just need to pull away. I just need to take space. That's a great way to lean into Saturn, especially Saturn in Aquarius. It's like, we got to just kind of put a wall up right now. And that's okay. That's okay if you're not feeling like you can properly relate to other people. That might be the most responsible thing to do. So Saturn is the key here. And asking ourselves, what would be the most mature thing I could do right now, seems like it could be a solution to any tension that is arising. Taking that space to journal, to use the Sun conjunct Mercury to further process the lessons that are coming up right now. And Saturn could help us just kind of pull all the pieces of all this fragmented energy together for a greater understanding. With Mercury squaring Saturn, it's really forcing us to have this bigger understanding and learn these lessons, even these harsh truths that have been coming up and forcing us to see them through the eclipse. So the last thing I'll say about Saturn is Saturn wants us to slow down. Saturn does not like to move quickly. Mercury and the Sun might make it feel like your thoughts are racing. Uranus being on the other end feels like go, 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 being disrupted, being spontaneous, doing all the things. Saturn squaring all of them is like, whoa, 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 hit the brakes, slow down, take a beat. It's not going to be figured out today. It's a process. Saturn reminds us it's all a process, and we'll figure it out when the timing is right. Things take time, or so says Saturn. Yeah, you are both feeling that same energy with Mars and Gemini too. Mars retrograde. And remember, that's something to think about as well. We'll talk more about Mars tomorrow, because tomorrow's forecast will be a lot more smooth. We're talking about a grand trine tomorrow. Actually, there's these big aspects playing out this week. So we're kind of looking at broader themes all week coming off of the eclipse. And you can see it on the chart right there, that big blue triangle. That's balance, baby. That's harmony. And we're chatting about it tomorrow. Mars will play into that a little bit too. So Mars retrograde is slowing us down as well. And the slowdown feels like it can really help us gain our balance and pulling the lessons from the pain. All right, and that brings us back to our affirmation of the day. I am open to understanding. Going back to being flexible. This T-square is in fixed signs, and it makes us want to dig our heels in deeper and keep going into the harshness of the current energy. But when we open to flexibility, we open to possibility, that's when understanding can start to come through. When we have our journal right there and we have that like, and just write it down, you might notice the lessons start to kind of pour out of you, and you just giving yourself the space for understanding is huge. Being open, being flexible is huge. That whole divine timing thing, When things work out, when they will work out. Yeah, exactly. We can't control time, that's for sure. Saturn reminds us that. Saturn is the father of time. I'm going to go ahead and pull from the Universe Has Your Back deck today. Just a simple message to remind us that the universe does indeed have our back, even when it decides to throw a really tense T-square after a total lunar eclipse at us. And something that I want to clarify, because so many of you brought this up during our eclipse episode, and I'm so grateful for that. A lot of people were saying, oh my gosh, is this the last eclipse until 2025? And I had not heard anything about that. And I was like, there's no way it's the last eclipse. So to clarify, for those of you who are invested, oh, there's the card too. To clarify, it was the last total lunar eclipse until 2025. We will still have many eclipses between now and then. We'll have more solar eclipses. We will have several partial lunar eclipses, but Tuesday morning was the last time that we would see the moon turn that blood red color with a total lunar eclipse, the Earth's shadow fully being cast on the moon until 2025. So if you were able to see it, lucky you. You won't be able to see it again for a while. I was super bummed because here in Sacramento it was raining, so I got all excited. I'm going to be awake and I'm going to look for it, and I couldn't see it. But that's okay. I've seen one before. I know what they look like, and we'll try again in 2025. But just wanted to make sure I gave you that answer for those of you who were asking. So the card that came up seems so perfect already. My faith has the power to turn trauma into healing, conflict into growth, and fear into love. My faith has the power to turn trauma into healing, conflict into growth, and fear into love. Beautiful. It seems like that really plays into the openness, staying open, having faith in a plan greater than our understanding. And tomorrow, I think we'll end up talking a lot more about faith and trust and returning to our power. But this is a little reminder today that the universe has our back. We just have to have faith. And I love how it specifically talks about trauma into healing. This T-square, this eclipse could be bringing up shadows. It could be bringing up trauma, conflict into growth. Conflict is definitely possible today with Mercury squaring Saturn, opposing Uranus. If there's conflict coming up, laugh in the face of conflict today. Just be like, all right, T-square, okay, universe, we get it, right? And fear into love. Mercury squaring Saturn can definitely bring up those fears. That was a big theme of this eclipse for me. I was, after I last talked with you all, I hopped on a train into the city, into San Francisco, and it was such a fun little adventure for me, but I kept having fears come up throughout it, being by myself on the train, taking public transportation, being in Oakland, not the best area of Oakland either. I was like, oh my God, I'm, constantly on alert. I've got like my water bottle ready to be used as a weapon. And I just kept noticing all these fears coming up. But then I would remind myself, okay, I see you, fear. All right, we don't have to feel this way. I can acknowledge there could be potential threats around. It's good to be on alert, but I don't have to be so fearful of everything all the time because I have faith. I know my guides are protecting me. I know that I'm supposed to be here right now, and whatever is supposed to happen to me or for me is going to happen. So that's where faith can come in. Just trusting that if you're supposed to experience hardship, you're going to experience hardship. That's how the universe often teaches us lessons. But things don't have to be hard, and we don't have to be stuck in the fear of the unknown. The unknown is inevitable. The unknown is inevitable. So why fear it rather than just embrace it? Be open to possibility. That's the key to navigating this tense T-square, staying open to the lessons and open to the possibility and having faith that everything is happening to teach us something and help us grow, right? Wow, my cousin was in a motorcycle accident this weekend, and my mom is really triggered right now because he has the same injuries as my dad had. Wow. that is not the first time I've heard of accidents happening close to the eclipse. And a lot of people have passed away in my circle or in my awareness. So, but there's a lesson here, right? A lesson in the trigger, a lesson in the pain. You were able to kind of step into that role and be like, offer a different perspective and be like, oh, it seems like you're triggered because, you know, XYZ. Hardships often come up to teach us powerful lessons. Oh my goodness. Rose, wow. I don't blame you about being on alert. I was held at gunpoint there. Yeah, I mean, living in Northern California, living in Sacramento, I'm pretty aware. We're going to, of course, have a leaf blower outside my window. Pretty aware of, like, you know, different areas of not just the Bay Area, but Sacramento too, and where to be on alert and how to be on alert and just, you know, safety in general. But when you're in the moment, right? Like, yeah, you've got to be aware of your surroundings. I think not even just as a woman, but as anybody in a public space, in an area that's notorious for crime and things like that, being aware of your surroundings is huge. But if I'm constantly thinking about, oh my gosh, what could happen? Like at one point I noticed I was on the BART, which is public transportation subway system in San Francisco. And the car I was in, by the way, the BART, I had to take it from Oakland into San Francisco and go under the bay in a tunnel. And you know me, eclipses, I'm like, oh my gosh, what if this is the day that the BART tunnel collapses because it's an eclipse? And then I'm like, okay, nothing I can do about that. Can't control that. I'm guided. I'm protected. My angels are around me. It's all good. So not even just fearing other people, but also just like every little thing was bringing up fear. And then I'm on the BART and I notice every other person in my car is a man. And I'm like, oh God, like I'm the only woman in this train car. And then I thought, okay, I have faith that there are enough good men in the world that if something negative happened, somebody else would step in to help me out. So it's a fine line between being prepared and being alert and being overly fearful of every little thing. And that's what I was definitely falling into. But lessons learned, right? And deeper faith gained in knowing that I was protected and everything worked out because I got to where I was supposed to go and had an amazing time. Everyone has fear, but acting in times of fear makes you brave. Glad you were brave and had your water bottle. Yeah, my metal water bottle in my pocket, like, I was like, come at me. I am ready. Yeah, I was surprisingly and a little stupidly brave because I was drunk at the time. Luckily, I was sober, had all my faculties about me. But yeah, it's definitely something to be aware of, especially if you're by yourself in a big city. Anyway, that's my little story time of the day today. We'll come back to this nice reminder. My faith has the power to turn trauma into healing, conflict into growth, and fear into love. Full fear for the eclipses for Nikki too. Doing eclipse detoxification. Yeah, the eclipses I think brought up a lot of fear for everybody because of the square to Saturn. Saturn really makes us worried and doubtful and fearful, but today is a great day to process those fears with Mercury squaring Saturn. So noticing, am I being overly fearful? Am I being overly worried about certain things? Am I obsessing? That's possible with Mercury and Scorpio. And then returning to faith, returning to trust, and knowing that you are supported every step of the way. I hope this episode was helpful for you and hopefully helped you better understand T-squares in general. If you have a T-square in your chart, or if you are looking at someone else's birth chart and notice a big old T-square in there, just by the way, I have a T-square in my chart. And the first time I saw that, I was like, oh gosh. And then I gained a lot deeper understanding when focusing on the planet at the right angle of my T-square, which happens to be Pluto. I was like, okay, this tension is here to help me transform. So the tension we're experiencing today with Saturn at the focal point is here to teach us lessons. Pull the lessons. All right, everybody. Thank you all for showing up today, for showing up for yourselves, for showing up for this beautiful community that we are creating together. And yes, T-squares can be strength. Absolutely. If you have a T-square in your chart, you are probably somebody who's had to find a lot of strength in your life to overcome difficulties. So just know that you're strong enough to get through today's T-square, this week's T-square, this giant tension that's playing out. Some of the lessons you might be learning could involve how strong you actually are and what you are actually capable of. I know you are all capable of so many great things, and I fully have faith in you and the light you're here to shine in the world. I love you all. I hope you have a beautiful Wednesday. I will be back tomorrow. I'm not sure exactly what time. Full transparency, this week is bananas, but I'm thinking sometime tomorrow afternoon. So stay tuned. I will let you know. I'll schedule the stream and I'll see you when I see you. That's how this week is going to go. We're being flexible. We're surrendering. We're having faith and we're trusting. Until I see you next, though, stay curious. Thank you so much for joining us and aligning with the energy of the universe today. If you enjoyed this morning's episode of Transits Today, you can join our live astrology discussion every weekday morning right here wherever you're watching. And head to thespiritualjournalist.com to read your daily astrology forecast and browse the Spiritual Shop. The most fun way to help keep these forecasts free and support more content like this is to buy yourself a little something on our website. But if you're feeling extra generous, you can also buy me a coffee to fuel future live streams. Just tap the link in the description or head to buymeacoffee.com and search The Spiritual Journalist. And speaking of, you can also tune in to The Spiritual Journalist, our weekly live interview where we ask our guests questions about everything from crystals and manifestation to mental health and the environment. Those conversations stream live right here wherever you're watching now every Tuesday. I'm so grateful you found us here, and I can't wait for our next conversation.